My wife found my secret one I'd hidden since I was 11 years old. And instead of leaving, she did something worse. She accepted it. Too fast. Too eagerly. Until one Saturday morning, she asked me 4 words I couldn't say no to. Do you trust me? 2 hours later, I was standing in a lingerie boutique, in public, in broad daylight, being fitted for a bra and crying silent tears in the mirror while she smiled behind me, calling it love. This is the story of what happens when someone loves you, but doesn't know how to listen. Stay till the end, because this isn't the story the title makes you think it is. And if you're new here, welcome to Mr. Sister Studio. We tell real, honest stories about identity, relationships, and the courage it takes to become who you really are. So, if that's something you connect with, subscribe and turn on notifications, because there's a new story like this one every day. My name is Daniel, and for most of my life, I believed I had built something close to a perfect existence. I was 34 years old, married for almost 8 years to a woman named Clara, and from the outside we looked like the kind of couple people envied at dinner parties. I had a stable job at a mid-sized engineering firm, a small but comfortable house in the suburbs, a modest savings account, and 2 cats named Miso and Pepper who ruled the living room like tiny emperors. Clara worked in marketing for a lifestyle brand, and she was the kind of woman who could walk into any room and instantly make people feel at ease. She was confident, funny, sharp-tongued when she needed to be, and she loved me in a way that had always felt safe. I used to think that was the greatest gift life could ever give a person, to feel safe with someone. But safety, I would come to learn, is a strange and slippery thing, because sometimes the very people who make us feel safe are also the ones holding the sharpest knives, and they don't always mean to cut us, but they cut us anyway. I had a secret. I had carried it since I was maybe 11 or 12 years old, back when I first opened my older sister's closet and touched the fabric of a dress that shimmered like water under the ceiling light. I remember standing there frozen, feeling my heart pound in my chest like I had just committed a crime, even though no one was home and no one would ever know. I closed the closet quickly, embarrassed by feelings I didn't have the words for, and I ran to my room and buried my face in my pillow and told myself I would never think about it again. Of course I thought about it again. I thought about it every day. I thought about it when I was supposed to be doing math homework, when I was riding my bike home from school, when I was lying awake at 2 in the morning listening to the house settle around me. There was something inside me that wanted to know what it felt like to wear those fabrics, to see myself as someone softer, gentler, more feminine than the boy the world kept insisting I had to be. I didn't have a name for it back then. I only had shame. By the time I was 15, I had started stealing quiet moments. I would wait until the house was empty, and then I would slip into my sister's room, borrow one of her simpler dresses, one she wouldn't miss for a few minutes, and I would stand in front of the mirror in her bedroom and just look. Sometimes I cried. Sometimes I smiled. Sometimes I did both at the same time because there was joy in it, a real joy that felt like coming home, but there was also fear so heavy it made my knees weak. What if my parents found out? What if my sister walked in? What if the whole world could see through my skin and know what I really was underneath? I didn't have answers to those questions, so I did what most scared kids do. I hid. I hid everything. I hid so well that eventually I convinced even myself that the hiding was the real me, and the girl in the mirror was just a stranger who visited sometimes. I went to college, got my degree in mechanical engineering, and threw myself into work the way people throw themselves into religion when they're looking for something to save them. I dated women because that's what I thought I was supposed to do, and I actually enjoyed dating women because my attraction was real. I loved women. I loved the way they thought and laughed and moved through the world. But underneath all of that, the other thing was still there. In every apartment I ever lived in, there was a hidden drawer or a box in the closet, or a suitcase under the bed. And in that hidden place there were stockings, a bra or 2, a wig I had ordered online with my hands shaking, a soft cotton nightgown I sometimes wore when I was completely alone with the blinds drawn and the door locked twice. I called her Danielle. That was the name I gave to the version of me that only came out when the world was safely asleep. Danielle was quiet. She was careful. She never spoke above a whisper. But she was mine, and I loved her the way you love a secret that keeps you alive. Then I met Clara. We met at a friend's birthday party in a rooftop bar, and I remember the way she laughed at a joke I told, the kind of laugh that made me feel like I had just won a small lottery. We started dating 3 weeks later, and within a year we were living together, and within 3 years we were married in a small ceremony at her parents' lake house. Clara was warm in a way that made me want to be a better person. She knew how to hold my hand when I was stressed. She knew how to make me laugh when I was angry. She knew how to sit next to me in silence when I didn't have words. But she didn't know about Danielle. I never told her. And every time I thought about telling her, my throat closed up and my hands went cold because I was terrified of losing the one good thing I had ever built. So I kept Danielle in a locked suitcase in the crawl space under the stairs, and I told myself that this was a manageable kind of dishonesty, the kind that hurt no one, the kind that most people probably had in some form or another. The truth is, I underestimated Clara. I underestimated her intelligence and her attention. I underestimated how much she noticed. And I underestimated the ways in which she loved me because I was so busy protecting myself from an imagined rejection that I never gave her the chance to be the person she actually was. That was my first real mistake, and it was a mistake that took years to fully understand. It happened on a Tuesday in October. I remember the day because it was the day the rain finally broke after 2 weeks of dry weather, and the streets outside our house smelled like wet leaves and something metallic. I had come home from work early because my meeting was canceled, and I walked into the house expecting it to be empty. Clara usually worked until at least 6 on Tuesdays. But her car was in the driveway, and when I stepped through the front door, I heard her voice from the bedroom, low and quiet, like she was talking to herself. I walked upstairs slowly because something in the air felt off, and when I reached the bedroom door, I saw her sitting on the edge of the bed with the suitcase open in front of her. The suitcase from the crawl space. The suitcase that had been carefully hidden for almost 8 years. It was open, and she was holding one of the nightgowns in her hands, running her fingers over the fabric like she was trying to read a message written into the threads. I don't know how long I stood in the doorway. It might have been 5 seconds or 5 minutes. Time doesn't work the way it's supposed to in moments like that. Eventually she looked up, and our eyes met, and I saw something in her face I had never seen before. It wasn't disgust. It wasn't anger. It was something much harder to name, something that sat somewhere between hurt and curiosity and a strange, quiet knowing. She didn't yell. She didn't cry. She just said my name softly once, like she was checking to make sure I was really the person standing in front of her. I felt my whole life collapse in that single second. Every wall I had ever built came down at the same time, and I couldn't stand up under the weight of it. I dropped my bag on the floor, and I sat down on the carpet right there in the doorway because my legs wouldn't hold me anymore. I remember thinking very clearly, this is the moment my marriage ends. This is the moment I lose everything. This is the moment I have been dreading since I was 11 years old. And then Clara did something I did not expect. She stood up, walked across the room, sat down on the carpet next to me, and put her hand on my knee. She didn't say anything for a long time. She just kept her hand there, warm and steady, and slowly I realized that she wasn't running away. She wasn't packing her things. She was staying. When she finally spoke, her voice was gentle, but there was a tremor underneath it, and I could tell she had been sitting with this for a while, longer than I had realized. She told me she had first found the suitcase almost a year earlier when she was looking for the Christmas decorations. She had opened it by accident, seen what was inside, closed it, and put it back exactly where she found it. She had not said a word to me for 11 months. 11 months. She had carried this alone for almost a year, watching me, wondering, trying to understand what it meant, trying to figure out if I was cheating on her with another woman, or with a man, or with someone who wasn't her, and eventually piecing together that the person I was hiding was not another lover, but another part of myself. She said she had spent months reading online, talking anonymously to strangers on forums, trying to educate herself about what crossdressing meant, what it didn't mean, what it might mean for a marriage. And she had come to a conclusion. She said she wasn't angry. She wasn't leaving. But she also couldn't keep pretending she didn't know. She said we had to talk about it, really talk about it, because the silence was going to kill us both, and she wasn't going to let that happen. I cried in a way I hadn't cried since I was a child. Not sad crying. Not scared crying. It was the kind of crying that comes from a place so deep inside you that you didn't even know it existed. The kind that feels like something ancient breaking loose from the bottom of your chest. Clara held me. She didn't say much. She just held me and let me cry until I was empty, and then she kissed the top of my head and said, "We're going to be okay. We're going to figure this out together." And in that moment, I loved her more than I had ever loved anyone in my entire life. Over the next few weeks, we talked. We talked a lot. We talked at the kitchen table over cold cups of coffee. We talked in the car on long drives with no destination. We talked in bed at midnight when neither of us could sleep. She asked me questions no one had ever asked me before. She asked me when I first knew. She asked me what it felt like. She asked me if I wanted to be a woman, or if I wanted to be a man who sometimes felt like a woman, or if I was somewhere in between, or if I didn't know yet. I told her the truth, which was that I didn't know. I told her I had spent so many years pushing this part of me down that I didn't even know what shape it would take if I ever let it breathe. I told her I wasn't sure if I wanted to transition, or if I just wanted to dress sometimes, or if this was something else entirely. She listened. She didn't push. She said, "Take your time, Daniel, we have time." And that was the first time in my life anyone had ever told me I had time. But then slowly, something began to shift. I couldn't put my finger on it at first. Clara was still supportive. She still said all the right things. But there was a new energy in her, an eagerness, a curiosity that started to feel a little too curious. She began buying me things. Small things at first. A pair of soft socks that were technically women's. A skincare product. A silk scarf she said I should try, because it would feel nice against my neck. I was grateful at first because it felt like she was accepting me. But then the gifts got bigger. She came home one day with a full women's outfit in my size, laid it out on the bed, and said she wanted to see me in it. She wanted to see Danielle. She wanted to meet her. I hesitated. I don't know why exactly. Maybe because Danielle had always been mine, private and quiet and only for me, and turning her into something to be observed felt like translating a poem into a language it wasn't meant to live in. But Clara looked so hopeful, so excited, and I didn't want to disappoint her, not after everything she had given me. So I put the clothes on. I stood in front of her in the bedroom, in a dress and stockings and a soft cardigan. My hair styled the way she had shown me from a video, and she looked at me for a long time, and then she said, "Wow," and then she said, "You're beautiful," and I felt something warm rise up in my chest that I hadn't felt in a very long time. For a while, it was good. It really was. We would spend weekends at home together with me dressed as Danielle, cooking dinner, watching movies, curled up on the couch under a blanket. Clara would call me by my chosen name in those private hours, and she would use the pronouns I asked her to use, and it felt like a dream I had never allowed myself to dream. I felt seen. I felt loved for who I actually was, not just for the version of me I had been performing my whole life. But then Clara started to want more. She started to want us to go out. Just short trips at first. A walk around the block after dark. A drive through a quiet neighborhood with me dressed in the passenger seat. Each step felt terrifying, but each step also felt exciting, and I trusted her, so I said yes. I said yes to a lot of things I would not have said yes to on my own. And that was the second mistake I made, because somewhere along the way I stopped listening to my own body, my own hesitations, my own quiet no. I outsourced my consent to her enthusiasm. I thought if she was excited, it must be okay. I thought if she believed in me, I should believe in her more than I believed in myself. And that is a dangerous, dangerous way to live. The bra fitting happened on a Saturday in April. 6 months after she had discovered the suitcase. 6 months of transformation and negotiation and love and confusion, all tangled together like Christmas lights that had been stuffed in a box for a year. Clara had been talking for a few weeks about how the bras I owned didn't fit properly. She had watched a video about how most women wear the wrong size their whole lives, and she was insistent that if I was going to do this, I should do it properly. She said a real professional fitting would change how everything looked, how everything felt. She said it would help me feel more confident. She said she had already made an appointment. I remember the moment she told me. We were standing in the kitchen, and she was pouring herself a glass of wine, and she said it very casually, like she was mentioning a dentist appointment. I said, in public. She said, yes, in public. She said it was a lingerie boutique in the city, a small one, and she had spoken to the owner beforehand and explained the situation, and the owner had been kind and understanding and said it was absolutely no problem. They had fitted people like me before. I felt my stomach turn over. I felt my hands go cold. I said, Clara, I don't know if I'm ready for that. And she looked at me, and she smiled that smile of hers, the one that had always made me feel safe, and she said, Daniel, I promise you it will be fine. I will be right there with you the whole time. I love you. Do you trust me?
Do you trust me?
For words that have ended more relationships than any other 4 words in the English language. Because when someone you love asks you that, and you say no, it feels like an ending. And I didn't want an ending. So I said yes. I said, I trust you. And she hugged me, and she told me how proud she was of me, and she said the appointment was on Saturday at 11 in the morning, and I should wear the blue dress because it looked so lovely on me. That week was one of the longest weeks of my life. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. I would sit at my desk at work and stare at the screen and see nothing. I kept trying to picture it, walking into a store, in public, in daylight, dressed as Danielle, being touched and measured and looked at by a stranger, and every time I pictured it my chest tightened until I thought I would pass out. I told myself I was being dramatic. I told myself Clara was right. This was a normal thing that people did. This was what I supposedly wanted. This was the next step in accepting myself. I told myself the fear was just the residue of decades of shame, and that pushing through it would make me free. But something inside me, something quieter and older, kept whispering, you are not ready, you are not ready, you are not ready. I ignored that voice. I have thought about that voice every single day since. Saturday came. The morning was bright and cold, the kind of April morning where the sky is so blue it hurts to look at. I got dressed in the bathroom with the door locked, because even though Clara had seen me dressed dozens of times by now, I still needed the ritual of privacy to gather myself. I put on the blue dress. I put on the stockings and the shoes she had picked out. I put on the wig, and I did my makeup carefully, hands trembling, mascara wand knocking against my eyelashes because I couldn't keep still. When I stepped out of the bathroom, Clara was waiting in the hallway, and she looked at me and she said, you look perfect. She took my hand. She led me to the car. I got in the passenger seat and I put my seatbelt on, and I kept my eyes on the dashboard because I was afraid that if I looked out the window I would see a neighbor and my whole life would unravel right there in the driveway. The drive to the city took 40 minutes. Clara talked the whole way. She talked about how excited she was, how proud she was, how much fun this was going to be. She talked about maybe getting lunch after, at a little cafe she liked, and how we could make a day of it. She talked, and I nodded, and I made noises that sounded like agreement, but inside I felt like I was drowning. I felt like I was on my way to something I hadn't consented to, even though I had said yes, even though I had said yes multiple times, even though I had said yes when she asked me if I trusted her. Consent when you're too afraid to say no is not consent. That's something I would learn later in therapy, in books, in the long, slow work of putting my life back together. But that morning I didn't know that yet. That morning I just tried to breathe. We parked on a side street a block from the boutique. Clara turned off the engine and turned to look at me, and she must have seen something in my face, because for the first time all week she looked a little uncertain. She said, "Are you okay?" And I wanted to say no. I wanted to say I want to go home. I want to take this dress off. I want to sit on the couch with the cats and pretend this day never happened. But I didn't say any of that. I said, "I'm just nervous." She said, "That's normal." She said, "I'm right here." She squeezed my hand, and then she got out of the car, and she came around to my side and opened my door for me like I was her date. And I got out. I got out onto the sidewalk in broad daylight, in a blue dress, and I stood there for a moment blinking in the sun. The walk to the boutique was 1 block. It was the longest block of my life. Every footstep felt like walking through wet cement. I kept my eyes on the ground. I could hear people around us. A woman pushing a stroller. 2 men laughing about something. A delivery driver unloading boxes. I was sure every single one of them was looking at me. I was sure every single one of them could see through the dress and the wig and the makeup and know exactly what I was. I felt naked. I felt exposed in a way I had never been exposed before. Clara held my hand tightly and walked beside me and kept whispering, "You're doing great. You're doing so great." But I wasn't doing great. I was falling apart quietly on the inside, and no one could see it, not even her. The boutique had a small bell above the door that chimed when we walked in. The inside smelled like lavender and expensive fabric. It was smaller than I had imagined and softer, with pale pink walls and racks of delicate things and mirrors everywhere. A woman in her 50s came out from behind the counter, tall and elegant with silver hair pulled back in a clip, and she looked at us and she smiled and she said, "You must be Clara, and you must be Danielle. Please come in, come in."
Danielle.
She used my name, my real name, the name I had only ever heard said aloud by Clara in the privacy of our bedroom. And a stranger was using it now in public in a shop, like it was the most ordinary thing in the world. And I felt something crack open inside me. I don't know how to describe it exactly. It wasn't quite joy. It wasn't quite grief. It was the sound of a door I had kept locked for 20 years finally being opened, and I didn't know yet whether what came through it would be beautiful or terrible. The owner, her name was Margot, led us to the back of the store, past the racks and the perfumes and the little velvet chairs, to a fitting room with a heavy curtain and a raised platform in the middle. She was warm. She was professional. She had done this before. She explained the process, that she would take some measurements, that I could keep my dress on for most of it, that at some point she would need me to lift my arms and she would slip a measuring tape around my chest, and that if at any point I needed a break, I should just say the word. She spoke to me directly, not to Clara, and she looked me in the eye when she talked, and she treated me with a kind of casual respect that I had not been prepared for. I had steeled myself for judgment. I had not steeled myself for kindness. And kindness, when you are already fragile, can be almost harder to bear than cruelty. The fitting itself took maybe 15 minutes. Margot was efficient and gentle. She measured my ribcage. She measured across my chest. She made notes on a small pad of paper. She asked me questions about what I wanted, whether I wanted something for daily wear, whether I wanted padding, whether I wanted lace, or something more practical. Clara sat in a chair in the corner, watching, smiling. Every time I glanced at her, she gave me a thumbs up or blew me a small kiss. She looked delighted. She looked like someone at a birthday party. And every time I saw that look on her face, I felt something inside me twist a little tighter because I realized in a slow, dawning way that this moment was not really about me. This moment was about her. This was her fantasy of who I was supposed to be, and I was performing it for her, and I hadn't even noticed I was performing until I was already halfway through the show. Margot brought out several bras for me to try. She stepped out of the fitting room while I changed. Clara stayed.
Clara wanted to see.
Clara wanted to help me adjust the straps. Clara wanted to smooth the fabric across my back. And I let her, because what else was I going to do? Tell her to leave. Tell her I needed privacy. Tell her that this was too much. Tell her that I was sinking. I let her. I stood there on the raised platform in front of the three-way mirror in a bra that fit properly for the first time in my life, and I looked at myself, really looked, and I saw Danielle looking back, and Danielle was crying. Silent tears, just running down her cheeks. Clara was behind me smiling in the reflection, and she didn't notice. She didn't notice the tears. She was fixing the strap. She was saying, "Look at you, look how gorgeous you are." And I stood there, and I let the tears fall because I did not have the words yet for what was happening inside me. We bought 3 bras that day. Clara paid. Clara chose. Clara insisted on a matching set she said would look beautiful on me. Margot wrapped everything in pale pink tissue paper and put it in a small paper bag with a silk ribbon handle, and she walked us to the door, and she said, "Come back any time, Danielle. It was truly a pleasure." And I said thank you in a voice that didn't quite sound like mine. And then we were back out on the sidewalk, and the sun was still bright, and the air still smelled like spring, and Clara was practically bouncing beside me, saying, "Wasn't that wonderful? Wasn't Margot wonderful? Aren't you glad we did this? Aren't you glad? Aren't you glad?" I said yes. I said I was glad. I said thank you. I said all the things I was supposed to say. We went to that little cafe she had mentioned, and we ate salads and drank iced tea, and Clara talked about future plans, plans I hadn't agreed to, plans about maybe taking me to a salon next, and then maybe to a friend's birthday party in a few months, and then maybe further, always maybe further. And I nodded and I smiled, and I felt myself becoming smaller and smaller inside the blue dress until I was almost gone. When we got home, I went straight upstairs. I told her I was tired, and I wanted to lie down. I closed the bedroom door. I took off the wig and the dress and the shoes and the stockings and finally the new bra, and I put on old sweatpants and a t-shirt, and I sat on the edge of the bed, and I stared at the wall for a very long time. And in that silence, in the safety of that small room, I finally heard the voice I had been ignoring all week. And the voice said, that was not love. That was not acceptance. That was ownership. And I sat with that thought until the light outside the window turned gold, and then gray, and then dark. Now, I want to be careful here because I know how this could sound, and I don't want to make Clara into a villain. She wasn't a villain. She was a person, a complicated person, who loved me and who also had her own needs and her own fantasies and her own ways of processing the enormous things she had discovered about her husband. I think, looking back with as much honesty as I can manage, that Clara had converted her fear into a kind of project. She had turned my identity into something she could manage, plan, dress up, take out into the world on her arm. It made her feel in control of a situation that had originally made her feel powerless. And I think at some level, she convinced herself that all of this was for me, that she was helping me, that she was giving me the freedom I had never had. And in some ways she was. She really was. That's the confusing part. It wasn't all bad. It wasn't all wrong. She had opened a door for me that I could never have opened alone. But she had also walked me through that door faster than I was ready to go, and she had done it with such enthusiasm and certainty that I had lost the ability to know what my own pace was. That night, after the bra fitting, I couldn't sleep. Clara fell asleep next to me, one arm across my chest like always, her breathing slow and steady. I lay there in the dark and I felt her arm on me, and I thought about how many nights I had lain in that same position and felt safe, and how tonight I did not feel safe, and I didn't know what to do with that. Around 3 a.m, I got up and I went downstairs. I sat on the couch in the dark with Miso, the cat, curled up in my lap, and I did something I had never done before. I picked up my phone, and I typed into a search bar the words I had been afraid to type for 20 years. I typed, what does it mean if you cross-dress? I typed, am I transgender? I typed, how do you know who you are? And I read. I read for hours. I read blog posts and forum threads and articles by therapists. I read stories written by other people who sounded exactly like me, people who had spent decades hiding, people who had come out to their partners with different results, some beautiful and some devastating. I read until the sky outside the window started to lighten. And by the time the sun came up, I understood 2 things very clearly. The first thing I understood was that I was not alone. There were thousands of people like me, all over the world, all figuring this out at their own pace, and none of them owed anyone anything about the timing of their own becoming. The second thing I understood was that I could not let anyone, not even someone who loved me, decide the shape of my journey for me. That morning I made coffee for Clara. When she came downstairs, still in her robe, hair messy from sleep, she smiled at me and kissed my cheek and asked how I slept.
I said not well.
She asked if I was okay. I said, we need to talk. And I watched the smile fade a little from her face, replaced by something more careful, and she sat down at the kitchen table across from me, and she put her hands around her coffee cup, and she waited. I told her everything. I told her that yesterday had been too much. I told her that the bra fitting had been beautiful in some ways but overwhelming in others, and that I hadn't been ready for it, and that I had said yes when I should have said not yet. I told her I appreciated everything she had done for me, that she had given me a gift I would never be able to fully repay, but that somewhere along the way we had lost track of whose journey this was. I told her that I did not know yet who I was going to become, but I needed to be the one to figure that out, at my own pace, in my own way, and that she had to let me. I told her I loved her, more than I had ever loved anyone, and that I wasn't leaving, but that we needed to change how we were doing this, because I was drowning. She didn't say anything for a long time. Then she started to cry. And this was a different kind of crying than I had ever seen from her. It wasn't sad crying or angry crying. It was the kind of crying that comes when someone has been holding their breath for a very long time without knowing they were holding it. She cried and she apologized. She apologized for a lot of things. She apologized for not asking me more often how I really felt. She apologized for pushing. She apologized for turning something private into something public before I was ready. She apologized for making my identity into her project. She said, "I was so afraid of losing you when I first found the suitcase. I was so afraid that if I didn't do something big, if I didn't prove to you that I accepted you, you would leave me and find someone who would love this part of you. So I overcorrected. I did too much. I did too much because I was scared, and I convinced myself I was doing it for you when really I was doing it for me. I am so sorry." We held each other at the kitchen table for a very long time that morning. The cats came in and out. The coffee got cold. Neither of us said much. There wasn't much left to say. What we had both learned, in different ways over those last 6 months, was that love without communication is just guessing, and guessing about the most important parts of another person is a very dangerous game. We started seeing a therapist together. Her name was Dr. Patel, and she was small and quiet, and she had a way of asking questions that made you answer honestly without meaning to. She helped us untangle a lot of things. She helped Clara understand that supporting me didn't mean building a schedule for me. She helped me understand that I had spent so long hiding that I had lost the ability to hear my own voice, and I needed to relearn how to say no, even to people I loved, especially to people I loved. She helped us both understand that my identity was not a puzzle to be solved on any particular timeline. Maybe I was a man who liked to dress as a woman sometimes. Maybe I was a woman who had been living as a man. Maybe I was something in between, something that didn't have a clean word yet. Maybe I would know in a year. Maybe I would know in 10 years. Maybe I would never know for sure, and that was okay too. Dr. Patel said, "Identity is not a destination. It's a conversation you have with yourself for the rest of your life." And that changed something for me. That took the pressure off in a way nothing else had. Slowly, over the months that followed, things got better. Danielle came out of the suitcase, but on my terms. Sometimes I dressed in the evenings at home, just for me. Sometimes Clara and I would spend a weekend together, both of us in soft clothes, painting our nails at the kitchen table, and it felt tender and real in a way our early experiments had not. Once in a while, I would go out, but only when I chose it, only when I felt ready. I found an online support group for people like me, and I made real friends there, people I could message at 2 in the morning when I was having a hard night. I started reading books about gender that I would have been afraid to touch a year earlier. I started keeping a journal. I started, very slowly, becoming a whole person for the first time in my life. The bra we bought that day at Margot's boutique, I still have it. It sits in a drawer, not hidden anymore, just folded neatly next to my other things. I wear it sometimes. When I put it on now, I don't cry. I don't feel like I am performing for someone else. I feel, for the first time, like I am simply myself, and that has become the greatest gift anyone could have ever given me. Not the bra itself, but the long, painful, complicated journey to being able to wear it without shame and without permission and without an audience. I've thought a lot about that day at the boutique, about Margot's kindness, about Clara's misplaced enthusiasm, about the tears I cried in the mirror while Clara adjusted the straps, about the version of me who walked into that store not knowing how to say no, and the version of me who walked out of that store already beginning, quietly, to change. That day was not the worst day of my life. It was not the best either. It was the day I realized that the person I trusted most could hurt me without meaning to, and that I could hurt myself just as easily by not speaking up. It was the day I began to understand that self-discovery is not a gift someone can give you. It is a country you have to walk into alone, even if the people you love are waving from the other side of the border. If you are watching this and you see something of yourself in my story, I want to tell you a few things. I want to tell you that whatever you are hiding, it is not as terrible as you think it is. I want to tell you that the people who love you may surprise you in good ways and in complicated ways, and that being loved is not the same as being understood, and being understood takes time, sometimes a lot of time. I want to tell you that you do not owe anyone the pace of your own becoming. If someone loves you, they will wait. If they will not wait, that is important information, and you should trust it. I want to tell you that saying yes when you mean no is a form of self-abandonment, and it will hurt you eventually, no matter how much love is on the other side of that yes. I want to tell you that the small, quiet voice inside you that has been trying to tell you who you really are, that voice is not your enemy. That voice is the truest thing you have. Listen to it, even when it is scared, even when it is confused, even when it tells you things you don't want to hear. That voice knows the way home. Clara and I are still together. It has been almost 3 years since the day at the boutique. Our marriage is different now than it was before, and I would not say it is easier, but I would say it is more real. We fight sometimes. We miscommunicate sometimes. We are both still learning, but we know how to talk about the hard things now. We know how to sit at the kitchen table and say the truth even when the truth is uncomfortable. She has learned to ask me instead of assuming. I have learned to answer her honestly, instead of protecting her from my own feelings. That is a small revolution that took 2 people almost a decade to figure out, and I do not take it for granted for a single day. As for who I am, I still don't have a clean answer. Some days I feel like a man who has a beautiful, feminine part of himself that he was blessed to discover. Some days I feel like a woman who has been in disguise her whole life and is slowly, cautiously, letting the disguise fall away. Most days I feel like I am somewhere in between, and I have learned to be at peace with the in-between. The world wants everyone to fit into neat categories with neat labels, but real human beings are messier than that, and I have come to believe that the mess is where the truth lives. I am Daniel. I am also Danielle. I am both, and I am neither, and I am something entirely my own, and for the first time in my life, that feels like freedom instead of confusion. There is one more thing I want to share before I end the story. A few weeks ago, I went back to Margot's boutique. I went alone. I had not been back since that day 3 years ago with Clara. I walked in through the same door with the same little bell, and I smelled the same lavender in the air, and Margot looked up from the counter, and she recognized me instantly. She smiled, and she said, "Danielle, it has been a long time.
Come in."
And I sat down on one of her little velvet chairs, and I told her, briefly, about everything that had happened. She listened the way she had listened 3 years ago, with her whole attention, without interrupting. And when I was finished, she reached across the counter and took my hand and she said, "Sweetheart, I've been doing this for a long time, and if there is one thing I have learned it is that the first time is almost never the right time. You are always welcome here, whenever you're ready, in whatever way you need." And I bought a new bra that day, one I chose myself, one that fit the person I am becoming instead of the person someone else wanted me to be. And I walked out onto that same sidewalk in the same afternoon sun, and this time I looked up. I looked people in the eye. I saw them, and they saw me, and no one particularly cared, and that quiet, ordinary indifference of the world was the most beautiful gift I had received in years. So that is my story, the one behind the title. The one that lives underneath the words my wife took me to get fitted for a bra in public, and I couldn't say no. It is a story about betrayal, but not the kind of betrayal we usually mean when we use that word. It is a story about the small, quiet betrayals we commit against ourselves when we cannot yet trust our own voice. It is a story about the well-meaning betrayals other people commit against us when they love us, but do not know how to listen. It is a story about the long, patient work of putting yourself back together, one honest conversation at a time. It is a story about how the truth, when you finally say it out loud, is almost never as terrifying as the silence that came before it. And it is a story, I hope, about how possible it is to keep loving someone even after the illusion of who they were has fallen away, because what is left underneath the illusion is often more beautiful and more real than anything we could have imagined. Thank you for staying with me until the end. Thank you for holding this story with me. If it moved you, if it touched something in you, if it reminded you of your own hidden rooms and locked suitcases and the small voice inside that has been waiting patiently for you to listen, please know that you are not alone, and you have not run out of time, and there is a version of your life on the other side of the truth that is waiting for you, gentle and patient, whenever you are ready to walk toward it. My name is Daniel. My name is also Danielle. Welcome to Mr. Sister Studio. I will see you in the next story.